It's my pleasure today to introduce Linda Chu, internationally renowned organizer, speaker, and founder of Out of Chaos. Out of Chaos offers comprehensive professional organizing services for home and office, plus training programs, workshops, and tools for more organized living and working. Linda, thank you and welcome for coming. No, I didn't say that right. Thank you for coming back. We hosted you well over 5 years ago on our podcast. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Katie. It's my pleasure. I cannot believe that much time has passed.
You got to take out a 3-year window for you know what, but
No kidding, right? No kidding.
yeah. So, well, maybe I'll just start with, what is, if people are listening to our previous podcast together, what are the biggest challenges people are facing today in trying to get organized?
Well, the biggest challenge, especially over the last couple of years where everything was under a roof. You had family, you had, schooling at home, you have all members of the working families all working from home. So people were literally just bursting at the seams. And then they realized they've collected. Not only was it just the collections, it's just that there was nowhere that was open that were taking things. So the biggest challenge is always, regardless of this nasty pandemic, it's always been, what do I do with all this stuff? I've now collected it. Now what? So it's the big ... Now what? And it's the overwhelm of, oh my goodness, where do I begin? Don't even know how to start. And that overwhelm just kind of, let's slam the door shut and leave it till another day. That sort of room with the tape around it,
Yeah. Or all the bins under the bed or the
Yeah,
basement room
yeah.
that takes everything. So,
Well, the later piles, later never comes. It's always, we always move forward. It's hard to kind of look back.
so I know I touched on briefly in your introduction what services you provide, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the services that Out of Chaos provides.
Yeah, absolutely. We often work in an arena. I call it the 5 Ds. It's usually by circumstance, which is why people call. So it's around death. It's around divorce. Those that are downsizing or right sizing, however you want to look at it. It's the disability, the inability to maneuver around the home as one ages, perhaps, or if they're injured, or they just have too much stuff and now you have aisles. Not a hoarding situation, but it's around the ability to move within the home freely. And then just a regular decluttering, too much stuff and not enough home. And in each one of those circumstances, not always, it necessitates a move. People, as a result of death, divorce, downsize, etc., they require to move out of their home. So now the whole arena around how to manage the move and all the details around it, not to mention the stuff.
That would be a big one. I think the biggest of which rings true for me, is thinking about downsizers, because we do have a large majority of aging population that are still living in their homes and
Yeah.
choose to want to, which is fantastic. But as they are ready to transition out of that lifelong home,
Yes.
they don't move, every 3.5 years like everyone does today. My
Yes.
mom's in her home that she's been in since the early 70s. So that sort of downsizing would seem to me to be maybe your biggest piece of your business today. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. It has been a majority stakeholder in terms of what it is that we do, is the navigation around the volume, the decades of volume that people have. You have to remember that it's taken decades to collect. So think about your parents and your grandparents who had basements, who had attics, who actually had garages, attached garages and such that they fill their homes with. So if it's taken 2, 3 decades, 20, 30, 40, 50 years to collect, it's not going to be overnight that you're going to disperse of this. And this, herein lies the issue that we all have. And I always look at it as, for every decade, it's at least a week to go through all that volume. It's to go through the emotions, it's to go through the intentions, it's to uncover what has been hidden underneath all of the piles
Mhm.
and boxes and bins, and to sort of look at, does it have a place?
Mhm.
And again, people go through the whole intention again, oh, I kept this because, and maybe I should do something with it. So it's going through all of that all over again. And
Yeah.
then as you're aging and as you get older, sometimes the physical and sometimes the cognitive ability or inability is present. So that makes it even harder to
Mhm.
have someone else come through and do that for you. Imagine going into your grandparents and your mom's place or your parents' place
Mhm.
to deal with what was really their possessions and their intentions.
Mhm. Now, what steps do you take the clients through? You mentioned a bit of it just now, but to become more organized, not necessarily just with downsizing, but in all stages. What is your process of
Mhm.
enabling or helping that and getting people past that close the door and forget about it stage?
For sure. I use an acronym called CLEAR because that's what we all want is clear space. We want more space. So the acronym CLEAR simply stands for to categorize, to limit, to evaluate, to allocate, and to remove the intention to clear the space. So the categorization simply is like with like and put them into functional categories, whether it's camping, whether it's baking, whether it's canning, study, reading, whatever it may be, clothing. So it's try to consolidate into its like with like categories. From there, we need to limit the volume because the whole intention is too much stuff, want to clear our space. So
Mhm.
we really have to work on limiting what we have. And the whole limiting exercise is very can be very emotionally charged because you're revisiting what was once your intention, which is why you kept that item. So it's the reducing, the purging, whatever word you want to add to it, is really reducing the volume of what you have, limiting what you have. Then what you, and while you're going through this, the evaluation is really setting loose or not loose, clear goals and choosing your stuff versus your space or more your space versus your stuff. um, and that's the hardest thing is to reconcile with, yeah, I want it, however I don't have the space, so what's really more important? I always say door number three doesn't exist in that scenario, it's only one or two, and you've got to make that hard
Yeah.
decision. And then the allocation is really looking at where in the home do what you want to keep, where does it need to reside so that it's accessible to you when you need it. And it's also what containment it is housed in. Is it on a shelf, is it in a bin, what type of shelf, what type of bin? So that whole allocation of space and resources and systems is really important here. And then lastly, the items that you don't want, that you have kind of limited yourself on, what about all the excess? What do you do with that?
Hmm.
So it's the reduce, recycle, it's passing things on, the rehoming strategy, or
Mhm.
that exit strategy, I call it. Now that you know that this is what you don't want, how do you get this stuff out of the home? Where does it go short of the landfill? And that landfill proposition is, that's what stops a lot of people. What
Mhm.
a waste, I pay good money for it, so someone must want it. And it's
Mhm.
it's going down that whole journey of finding that new home, which in itself is a whole journey and
I was
job.
gonna say you must engage other professionals for that piece of the
Hmm.
process,
Yes.
such as,
Oh, absolutely.
there's great secondhand stores that take dishware, beautiful
Hmm.
glasses. My
Yeah.
mom keeps trying to give me stemware or tea sets, and we don't have space for them.
And it doesn't fit in the dishwasher.
I don't not want them, but there's no space for them. But the process of trying to rehome them into a home where you know that they will be loved and adored for the value that they held for us. You
Yes.
must engage other professionals for a part of that process.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, without the service providers that we've made contact with and acquired some incredible relationship with, we've been doing this for over a couple of decades. Like, I cannot believe how long it's been. But through those decades, we have met up with some great, whether they're movers, consignment, auction houses.
Mhm.
There's been so many professionals, appraisers that have way more information than I do, but they certainly have been able to help me to find the true value of something and really be really honest so that I can pass that information on to our clients in terms of, does this item that they have held on to for so many years really have value? You know,
Mhm.
the value is, value, you purchase something is of a particular value. The resale value is different from the insurable value. So and then there's the emotional value. So there's many different types of evaluation systems. Most people hold on to things. There's an emotional, historical, sentimental value that they have, so that that value doesn't always match what the market value is, what you can resell it. You look at, it's like a car. You've spent 40, $50,000 on a car, and 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later, as memorable, as precious as this car might be, it's the value isn't there on the resale market in
Mhm.
terms of comparing it to what you've purchased it. And that goes with every item that you have. But yes, the service providers that we've worked with, it has been amazing, to sort of help us to evaluate the true value and to see whether the time and effort required to sell an item, resell it, consign it, whether it's worth the expense of having the movers and the removal service get those items into the
Mhm.
right place.
It makes me think of a story. You posted a spoon, what looked like a silver spoon
Yes.
the other day, and it brought me memories of a silver spoon that it had jagged edges. So it wasn't identical to that spoon, but that used to be a spoon I would eat my grapefruit with
Grapefruit. I was just gonna say.
sprinkle the sugar on. So I have these beautiful memories of being a kid and dad cutting the grapefruit around the ring and then sprinkling sugar on it, which I
Yeah.
thought was a super big treat, and
Yeah.
then using that spoon. So for me, that spoon, I don't even know whose spoon it was, and it wasn't the
Mhm.
same, had that memory come up for me. So I can only imagine for others processing through all the items, all the things that can come up.
Yeah, I mean, memories are priceless. You can't put a dollar value onto it, but when you're looking to sort of eke out some money out of possessions that you have, that passing on and that resale value, it can be night and day,
Mhm.
night and day in terms of what you hold dear in your head versus the reality of what the market will bear.
Yeah. Now, how is transitioning or downsizing an office different from a home? Because your office may now also be within a home, or you
Hmm.
might be looking to transition to a home office because of that availability now with this change up as we work 3 years into the pandemic.
Yeah, the home office or the office within the home in terms of sort of the transition of it,
Yeah, like,
or
are you
the
able to offer the downsizing services? Say you're in a corporate office, but you're now able to work from home, but you've got
Oh,
way
absolutely.
more stuff than you can take into, say, a one room office space at home.
Oh, for sure. I mean, nowadays, many people are increasingly embracing technology. So what was once printing reams and reams of paper, a
Mhm.
lot of people are now working in the cloud, and that physical volume of information that we hold near and dear is slowly moving into the electronic field. That being said, there's still many people mired in paper. So information, the transition of moving from a physical office into a home office is really around the space, because you don't have the dedicated space that you have in an office for your office. So you're trying to carve out a space in your home. And if you do have a dedicated room, even within the room, which is now your home office, you still have to dedicate zones, an area where the printer goes, area where your information goes, the workspace and the desk type and style, the type of lighting, the comfortable chairs, all the ergonomics, because you're still dealing with the healthy body in order to be at work and injury free. But as far as the management of information is concerned, I always look at three pockets of information. What is active that's generating you income? These are your open records and your clients that you're working with or projects. There's your reference materials. So think about that in the old school reference library. As you go about doing the work that you do, you need to refer to information in order for you to do your work, whether it's electronically, whether it's on the internet, or in a physical binder book format. We have to create ourselves this reference section and of information to refer to. And then lastly, there's the archives and the memories. Due to legislation, whether it's the CRA, whether your industry standards require to keep your records for so many years, you have to be mindful of that. So where do you keep 7 years worth of records, or is it to infinity? So it's really separating that information into those three big buckets. And then within those buckets, how do you file it? Do you scan it? Is it in file folders? And then if it's in folders and even in electronic files, what's the naming convention? So how do you name that record so that you can electronically find it, on your systems? Is it day, month, year, month, date? So there's so much to go with. First name, last name, first name. So the naming convention in terms of how you name your records is important, because it has an impact in terms of how quickly you or anybody that you work with within your office can find that record. No different than a physical sense, but you're dealing with something that you can't touch.
So for personal or business, what are some of the most common questions you get asked today?
The most common is where to begin. So people just, it's like they're so overwhelmed, they don't even know where to start. When it comes to the volume of what they have, the intention is to remove and reduce and to sort of get these things out of the home and office. It's a question of, I don't know where to shred this. Is there a home-based shredders? Can someone come in? It's about rehoming. I just want to find a good home. So it's all of the ending, the end game as to what happens with all this stuff. So that is one of the most common concerns that people have, is sort of not knowing where all of this stuff goes.
So I guess the first question then is, or the answer to the first question is to call you. And if it isn't you that can assist, you would have references as to who people should reach.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us today that people should know around what you do, or how you do it with them? Tips and tricks? Anything else?
I always say, if it's not broken, there's nothing to fix, and as long as the system works for you, aesthetics is one thing. You can throw so much money around aesthetics for a particular look. I always work with getting things functional, get things to work, and as your budget allows, you can throw in the aesthetics for a particular look. Just because it looks a particular way doesn't necessarily mean it works any better. And when it comes to systems, we change as people. Our circumstances change, our life circumstances, the work that we do, the people that we have around us always change, but our systems often don't change with us. It's like saying to your children, you're going to give them one pair of shoes that's going to last them their whole lifetime. That doesn't work. They grow out of shoes.
Like 5 days they last.
Right, and there's different activities and, whether you're in a ball gown or a tiara or you're, climbing a mountain, the outfit changes. So our systems are the same. We change, our circumstances change, our activities change, so our systems have to change. So if the system is broken, it might not be broken, it's just that your life has changed. We have to revisit our systems and we have to revisit them frequently because they get stale. We have to update.
Or they're familiar to us, but they don't function well within our
Yeah.
environment. Yeah.
Yeah. Change is always hard. So sometimes it's just a tiny little switch. And when it comes to volume, I always liken it to when you're starting out in life, remember the housewarming parties that you have and people come in and they give you a blender and a toaster just because you're all starting out. So now as we transition in life, I call it a house cooling. We're not warming up anymore. We're kind of cooling off. And as we cool off, we've got to kind of peel back the onion and peel off the layers and kind of remove this volume that we have in our home. So you kind of look at two sides of the spectrum here.
I love it. I love it. Well, Linda, how do people reach you if they are looking for more information
Mhm.
and or to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is outofchaos.ca. So you can certainly look me up there. I have a decades worth of articles that I've written, and you can sort of follow through on the articles, and hopefully that information is helpful. And always give me a call. Information is always free. So
Very
love to
wealth
chat
of
with you.
knowledge. So thank you once
You're
again
very
for
welcome.
taking the time to be here and to share that with us and anyone watching today. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie, for having me.